whether it be through ICE and other activities that they're taking, is to make all of you feel powerless, that you don't have a voice, that you can't bring change, that the die has been cast. The reality is that's not the case. And I want to talk about what we need to do. But before I do that, let me tell you what I'm running for. This is obviously the 2nd congressional district of New Hampshire. I'm running in the 1st. I know that there's a number of towns that do come to this meeting that are covered by the 1st congressional district. But I want to make sure you all know where I'm running. I'm not running against Maggie Goodlander. I'm running for Chris Pappas's open seat. So covering. So this is the way I was thinking about proceeding. Let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you why I'm in this race. Let me tell you what I think we need to do to bring change to this country. And then I want to take questions from all of you. Kick the tires. Ask some hard questions. I think that's really important. So, you know a little bit about me, but one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently, I'm a first-generation American, literally the first in my family born in the United States. My parents are immigrants from Mexico and Spain. And I say that with a lot of pride, especially with the moment this country's facing right now. And when I talk about that, I say, I'm a proud son to an immigrant mother that was a nurse at Catholic Medical Center and a father that was a community organizer. In happening right now, regardless of what. And one of the things that I think a lot about is my story. So I grew up in Hudson, down on the border with Massachusetts, over right next to Nashville, relatively small town. Took my first job actually bagging groceries at Market Basket. And I like to tell this story because I think it actually tells us something about what's really broken in America. So I'm 14 years old. It's 2000. So I'll let you all do the math on how old I am, okay? So I'm 14 years old. I take a job as a bagger at Market Basket. Minimum wage. At that time, $5.25 an hour. And that felt like the world to me. And it let me get a little bit of money to spend and save up for college where I wanted to go. But that minimum wage, in a quarter century, it's gone up $2. Has it gone up since 2009? Exactly. Cost of living since 2009 has gone up about 40%. And I talked a lot about Washington has let every single one of you down. And maybe you all don't work for the minimum wage, but they've let you down in a number of different ways. But that story to me tells us something about a broken Washington. And it's not only about the Republican Party. I don't think they give a damn about a lot of this stuff, but the Democratic Party has also had power too. We need change in the Democratic Party, change in Washington. And I just say, point to that minimum wage. So, got a shot to go to college. It's now the early 2000s. Started actually getting involved in politics. I went to University of Iowa. So University of Iowa has a really great writing program. I thought I'd be the next great American writer. Very quickly, I found out I will not be the next great American writer. And that's okay. That's all right. But it was the Iraq War, the height of the war. And to me, I thought there was a real calling to get involved in opposition to the war. I went, knocked doors against the Iraq War, and I feel like this country's going to be asked the same question again when it comes to foreign adventurism that is violated of the law internationally and domestically. I've been thinking a lot about those days. So spent a summer, a fall too, knocking doors. Decided, okay, I'm not going to be the next great American writer, so I'll be a lawyer. So ended up going to law school at the University of Michigan. Got a law degree and a master's in international relations. I took on all this debt. I literally graduated college and law school with $250,000 in debt. And I wish it was a remarkable story. I wish it'd be like, wow, that guy, how did he do that? But the thing is, it's a pretty common story for so many Americans that have to mortgage their future for decades just to pursue their dreams. And I think that's fundamentally unfair. And Washington, again, has failed to thoughtfully address this. So I have this $250,000 of debt. I'm literally interviewing for jobs. 2008, 2009. When Lehman collapsed, I was literally at a job interview. So I ended up getting a job, but they said, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. The economy may collapse at any moment. Why don't we hold your job for a year and we'll let you know if it's available to you or not, okay? So I started scrambling. I took my first job actually as a lawyer down at the Hillsborough County Attorney's Office, working from questions of DUIs to even attempted murder cases. Spent my first year, that was like my first kind of real legal education outside of law school. Got the opportunity to finally take that job at that law firm and spent almost a decade working on international law and human rights. And the case that I'm proudest about, I'm going to tell you all about it, and I've been thinking a lot about that case because of what's going on in this country. It's a pro bono case I took on. So I'm a young attorney, fluent in Spanish, okay? My law firm has taken on this new pro bono client. It's the family of this man that was killed during the Pinochet regime's control in Chile in the early 70s and into the 80s. And they said, hey, Christian, you're a litigator, you do international legal issues, and you speak Spanish. You're one of one at the law firm, so you're gonna work on this case. And I spent 5 years chasing down this killer. So I'm gonna tell you the story of what happened, because I think it tells us a story about what happens when the rule of law breaks down, when our institutions fall apart, and when the rule of law works. So early 70s, Chile had a coup d'etat. Now that coup d'etat was fomented by the United States, specifically by Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. And like a conspiracy theory for me, okay? One of the first few things that dictatorship did is they rounded up everyone they thought was a subversive people opposed the government. One of those people ended up becoming the estate of the gentleman that I represented, a man by the name of Victor Jara. Now, Victor Jara in Chile was one of the most famous political activists. He was a famous singer-songwriter. Everyone knew in Chile who Victor Jara was. He was detained at the university where he taught. He was brought to a torture facility, tortured for 3 to 4 days, then shot and killed. His wife spent 40 years, literally 40 years, chasing down her killer, his killer, I should say, until she engaged the law firm where I worked. And so that's where my part of the story starts. Spent 5 years figuring out what happened, who did it, where is the person that did it, and we tracked him down to the most notorious state in America, Florida, okay? Living in Orlando. I say that jokingly, Florida's fine. Tracked him down to outside of Orlando, Florida. So we brought a claim against him under international law. It's the Protection Act, and we ended up holding him accountable for these acts and building a record to have him extradited back to Chile to face criminal charges where the acts occurred. And the reason what happened in Chile at that time, rule of law worked. I genuinely feel like the rule of law is breaking down. Like administrative opponents, time again, is engaging in for themselves. The rule of law is under threat. And I put forward that it hasn't been under threat like this maybe since the Civil War, literally. Like, I think these are really grave times. And I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. Okay, so I did that. And after this, spending that time there, I for a long time, really believed in national service. I talked a lot about national service. was in my mid-30s at the time. And I was thinking to myself, look, I wanted to serve in the military, but I was very opposed to the Iraq War. That was or something. And I decided to join the military at 35. So put my legal career on hold, went to basic training, ended up becoming an officer, et cetera, et cetera. But at basic training, it was pretty funny. I was literally the oldest person there. And I'm not talking about the recruiter than my drill sergeants, okay? But I also stood with the best that America has to offer. I actually really mean that. Those 18, 19, 20-year-olds, that this is their shot at the American dream. And they engage in the most serious of business. And we have an obligation to them that I don't think this administration cares about ensuring that if we ask them to go to war, that they're doing it because our national security is really at stake, not because we want to get a bunch of oil or we want to get a bunch of ice up in Greenland, okay? This administration doesn't care about that sacred oath we should have to those service members. Still continue to serve here in the National Guard, specifically as trial defense services, as was mentioned. What does that mean? I'm like a public defender for our soldiers. Essentially, when they have a serious criminal action against them in the military or an allegation, they have a right to counsel. I represent them. In the last administration, I was also appointed by President Biden as special counsel to the Pentagon. So what does that mean? Essentially, I was advising the Secretary of Defense and other senior leaders on how do we ensure that our military operations Constitution, and I don't know what the hell is going on in that building right now, okay? Because either the lawyers don't know what they're talking about or no one's listening to the lawyers. I'm not entirely sure. Probably a little bit of both. Look, I think about my story and the moment we're in, and I do ask myself one question time and time again, and as I've gone to different town halls and all these conversations I've had. If my parents, the immigrants that came here in the 80s, if they were starting off today in America, would they get a fair shake? And all of you should ask yourselves in your story, whatever way it is, it's not only about immigration. Will you get a fair shake in America today if you're starting off? Or would your kids or your spouse? And we all kind of know the answer. It's deeply unsettling. We feel it in our bones. Because the answer is plainly no. And this is the thing, though. It's not just about Trump, as atrocious as he is. We've known that America hasn't been working for a really long time. Like, if anyone here has gotten really sick or seen someone they love, they know exactly where the first thought you have isn't about how do we get the right medical care. It's about, can we actually afford this? Is this going to bankrupt us? How do we make ends meet? I think that's fundamentally immoral that in the richest country in the world, with all this capacity and capability, everyone in this country doesn't have health care. So that, yes, Medicare for all specifically. So I've called from that from day one. There's a few important things that I talk about, okay? But that to me is one of the most important compacts I believe I have with the voters going in. If I'm elected, I'm gonna fight like hell for universal health care, for Medicare for all. I think there is a common sense solution. There's no reason, and this is the thing, inevitably, I did this interview once, and they asked me, well, Christian, how do we afford it? And I said to them, let's talk about our current healthcare system. We spend 2 times per capita as any other country in the world on our healthcare. 100 million Americans have medical debt right now. 80 million to 90 million Americans are not covered or are undercovered right now. If you get cancer, 25% chance you'll go bankrupt. That system doesn't work. That system is obscenely expensive. And who seems to benefit is big pharma and health insurance companies. And guess who's writing the checks to our politicians? Big pharma and health insurance companies. I've come out since day one. I've said I won't take corporate PAC money. I'm here to serve the people, not to serve corporations. They can handle themselves. And you deserve leaders that are not just chasing checks from corporate pharma, because it's breaking our healthcare system. We need change desperately. And I talk a lot about housing too, and you all have seen how broken our housing system has become. So in the United States, we're 4 to 7 million homes short. Depends who you ask, okay? To me, one of the most basic things that government should do is ensure that people have enough homes to live in. And this is the thing, our leadership doesn't have a vision for laying out how do we get from where we are, which is obscenely unaffordable lack of supply, to where we need to go. But this is the thing, when did this country become a country that can't do tough things, where we're just paralyzed? To me, we need change, and I've laid this out. I'm going to talk about a few of the main levers that I think will actually fix our housing crisis. One is we actually need a national infrastructure bank that views housing as critical infrastructure in this country, that provides competitive loans to local builders, that build starter homes. One of the reasons we're in this crisis, we don't have enough starter homes. In the 1980s, 30% of our new builds were starter homes, which are defined as less than 1,300 square feet, more or less. Today, what do you think that number is?
It's going to be 2% or something.
You're close. You're close. 7%. That's the reason, part of the reason, a big part of the reason why. And government still hasn't developed a plan to actually tackle this. We also need to incentivize municipalities and towns to actually create a more efficient permitting process and reduce lot sizes. That's also part of the story too. But this is the thing, Washington needs to have a vision to do that. I think it's critically important that we tackle this. And I'm going to talk about one more thing, childcare. To me, childcare is such a crisis in America right now. If someone is trying to have 2 kids in childcare, it's going to cost them in New Hampshire, on average, around $35,000 a year, post-tax. So pre-tax, that means roughly $50,000 or so. And guess what's happening? People are doing the math and they're saying, this doesn't make any sense. If it's a 2-spouse household, one of the spouses is going to jump out of the workforce for 4 to 5 years, take care of the kids. And this is the thing, that's perfectly fine when people freely choose to do that, not when they're essentially coerced because it's so expensive to have childcare. The economic benefits are clear. We need a universal childcare system. We need to invest in it. We need the federal government to actually tackle this, to give everyone in this country a fair shake. To me, though, those 3 issues talk about the Washington that's been broken for a really long time. And we do need to acknowledge the Washington that's broken right now. The acuteness of what's happening from the Trump administration. We're seeing it. I want to talk specifically about ICE in our communities. A militarized force. You know, ICE's budget, if it was a military, would be the 16th largest budget in the world for military. They literally have a bigger budget than Turkey for their military. And they've been unleashed in our communities. They don't care about the law. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about basic human dignity. And this is a story right now. There are not enough, I'm going to be tough on the Democrats. I'm going to be really candid with you. The Democrats aren't fighting hard enough on this. They're not. They're not. You know, in my race, I said Kristi Noem should be impeached. Okay, I called for that. Do you know how many other candidates have actually agreed with me on that? There's 6 candidates in my race. How many do you think? 1 other candidate. If we're not willing to stand up to Christine Naum and the white nationalist rhetoric of the Department of Homeland Security and what they're doing to our communities, why do people think we're going to actually fight for them? We have to be in this fight. I think it is critically important. To me, this is shredding our constitutional rights. We don't need people in our communities that look like they're about to go on the Bin Laden raid, traveling through, harassing people, detaining people, even kicking out combat veterans that fought for this country out of this country. The Democratic Party needs to fight a lot harder on this. There's a lot of issues to talk about. I want to hear what you all are thinking, what you want me to talk about. So with that, I'd love to take questions. I don't know how you all do this, but take that out.
Thank you. Oh, there must be somebody with a question. And here we have Terry. Okay, Terry.
Okay. Two things. I'm very impressed at how much your policy ideas overlap with Bernie's.
Yeah, well, he's a pretty good role model.
And the second one, if elected, will you think about joining the Congressional Progressive Caucus?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's an easy one. That's the easiest question I've gotten so far in a long time. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So with regard to housing, as you say, it's a complicated issue. One of the big issues here in New Hampshire, and many other parts of the Northeast, is that we're really dependent on building sewage and water infrastructure for each house that's built. And building, extending sewer lines, building municipal infrastructure is ridiculously expensive. And as federal money for that has gone away. Besides providing, the traditional model of, okay, give developers access to money, what about providing the actual infrastructure that's necessary to actually build inexpensive houses?
Yeah, I think that's exactly one of the things that needs to happen is the federal government needs to invest in the critical infrastructure that's actually needed to build homes. One of the reasons why private developers aren't building this is because the rates of return from an economic perspective are not really good. Yeah. But this is where government's supposed to play a role. And this is the thing, I never want to hear, oh, we can't afford it. We have no problem affording tax cuts for billionaires. I never hear that from the Republicans all of a sudden, or when they're saying they want to increase the budget of our Department of Defense by $500 billion. All of a sudden, we always have money for that. We should have money to build homes in America and to obviously to provide that critical infrastructure. Muchas gracias, pues gracias por tenerme aquí.
Particularly around. I come from a military family. My father was in World War II D-Day.
That's incredible.
My brother was in that veteran. And I can tell you about Mississippi. I was born in the United States, Texas, because I was brought up with an extended family, but however, I experienced discrimination growing up, but I never experienced what's going on in the United States. It's really good. Particularly that I'm glad you are touching on that subject, because the other day, I don't know, with clients or whatever, I was getting my license has already been extended. And I have also Mexico, the US. So somebody was calling me, I don't know, stop.
Here in Plymouth?
Yes, and they were going very slow. I was going 35 miles an hour, and I said, the air was tempted. But I don't know whether they were, but all I know is I could see the federal rearview mirror. And so they were coming very slow, they didn't pass me. So I turned, they were the other way, and I could see the tempted glass. I don't know what they were. I have no idea. If it could be, but it's kind of, I am not scared, but I am pissed.
Yeah.
But this way, I'm really pissed because I was going on in the United States. I again, I'm very heavily interested in that. If you do get elected, that I will vote for you. But if you do get elected, somebody has to do something about it.
Well, let me tell you what I think we need to do. And I want to talk about a bit more about the problem, why we're doing this. Okay, so one, obviously it's what this administration has given free rein to ICE. It's allowed, without vetting, the most abhorrent of human beings to join ICE that are not trained, are not restrained, and quite frankly, have a racist ideology. Significant number of ICE agents. Just going to call it what it is. So that's one. Two, the Supreme Court has actually made it legal, constitutionally speaking, to profile people. In September, a Supreme Court case came out of the LA riots. Justice Kavanaugh, you remember him, right? Yeah, Justice Kavanaugh wrote an opinion. And in that opinion, he said, well, a number of the factors that can be considered to determine whether there's a reasonable suspicion that someone is here in an undocumented status, which means they could be detained until it's identified whether they are actually in an undocumented status or not, is that they're Latino and that they speak Spanish. The Supreme Court has allowed racial profiling by ICE. So that's one. Two, this administration has this vision of creating, quite frankly, a sealed off, whiter America. Their words, not mine, literally. Just the other day, DHS posted a thing that said, how much better would America be with 100 million less people in it? The other day, too, they literally posted a song, We'll Have Our Home Again, that is a former KKK anthem and is now used by the Proud Boys. This is our government. You're literally paying for it. Literally. That's what we're paying for. So what do we need to do about ICE? One, dismantle, replace. Yeah, abolish ICE, dismantle. I dismantle, I don't know. We need to change it with something else, frankly, too. Like, look, I say this as, like, I just want to acknowledge it. I say this as a first generation American. Like, I've lived the immigrant experience. It is fundamentally consistent to say, yeah, of course we should have a secure border. Of course we should have an orderly process. Of course, if people commit serious crimes consistent with due process, we should get them out of this country. And of course, I don't believe that what ICE is doing is constitutional or legal. And don't let anyone ever tell you that those things can't be consistent. Fundamentally can be. So we've got to get rid of ICE. We've got to prosecute those ICE agents that are literally shooting mothers in the face in our communities. And Christy needs to go. She needs to be impeached or she needs to be resigned. I don't really care. I just don't want her there. Sure.
And then my second question is, what is your stance on Israel and Palestine?
Sure. Let me start with the first one, okay? Sorry, let me start with the second one. So look, I think in Israel, there's been systematic violations of human rights that have been carried out by the Israeli government, and Netanyahu should not be there. He's a terrible partner to the United States and to human rights. I've consistently called, I would sign on to Bernie Sanders' weapons embargo to Israel. Because right now, Israel needs to be constrained. We've tried private diplomacy. We've tried public diplomacy. We've tried international shame. It hasn't worked. Thousands more Palestinians in Gaza have died since the ceasefire. The ceasefire didn't really resolve anything. You cannot have a secure Middle East, a secure Israel, frankly, with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in abject poverty. I think that is fundamentally immoral. I don't think that they're a good partner to the United States until they fundamentally reform the way that they've carried out this conflict. And we actually need a two-state solution. Not like, oh, in some time, in 50 years, we'll have a two-state solution. We need a two-state solution now. I don't know, is it on the 67 borders? I'm not entirely sure. But what I do know is that Palestinian children should feel safe as well as Israeli children. It is not a zero-sum game, and it shouldn't be. The United States should actually exercise moral leadership there. So that's one. Yeah, well, the West Bank too should be, that's also should be Palestinian land as well. And it's probably the 67 borders are the right borders to do that. But I just don't want to like, it's a complicated issue as to like where you draw the lines. But what I do know, my North Star is that there should be an actual two-state and a recognized Palestinian state. Okay, so two, how do I differentiate myself from the other progressive candidates? Look, I've laid out a vision from day one as to how I will actually get progressive policies and advocate for them. I don't talk about progressive policies as some pie in the sky ambition. I've laid it out on my website, actually. I call it a fair shake for all. It's the most comprehensive policy proposal of exactly how do we achieve the things that I'm talking about. I'll also say this. I'm a progressive that can actually win a general election. No one's gonna come and say, oh yeah, you know that guy that worked at in the military and at the Pentagon, he's just some far off lefty liberal that doesn't know what he's talking about, okay? Progressive first and foremost. It's not only Democrats that feel like, I am confident that my message in the win and I can deliver progressive policies for the voters of New Hampshire.
Yeah, can you just outline your vision for Medicare for All and particularly how we're going to care for the children who our current health secretary is trying to take all their health care?
Yeah, sure. So look, the first thing, in order to Medicare for All, the way I think we should do day one, we should actually create a public option first, right? Like Medicare for All is a big change. And we just have to acknowledge that. We can't say all of a sudden everyone just expects that. It's not going to work like that. Two, we then start extending the coverage down from 65, 55, 50, 45, in some sort of sense that gets us there in about 5 to 6 years. I think that's a very sensible way to do it. I will acknowledge one thing. I do think if people want to supplement their health care, I think they should be able to do it with private health care. I'm never going to tell someone they can't spend their money on something that should, for all intents and purposes, be legal. Two, I think Medicare for All, it should have Part A and Part B should be combined. You shouldn't have to pay for that Part B and that should be to all the people that are registered. In terms of actually ensuring that children are getting the type of healthcare coverage that they need, especially through Medicaid, we actually need to fund it. The reason why it's not funded is because we wanted to pay for billionaire tax cuts, literally. Just think about how abhorrent that is, that kids in this country aren't getting healthcare coverage because Elon Musk needed a tax cut. That just tells you how broken Washington is. And we need to fundamentally, and the Democrats, look, we're in the minority on this, but we need to be talking about this every single day, raising the alarm, because so many people in this country are going to literally die needlessly because our healthcare system is so broken and this administration is breaking it more and more and more. So thank you for your question.
There's an op-ed in the editorial of the Globe today about Social Security. Talked about a little bit about Mitt Romney's voting.
Sure, yeah.
There was an editorial in the Globe today about Social Security and funding the Social Security Trust Fund, and it's supposed to run out sometime in the next decade. It referenced Mitt Romney's op-ed in the New York Times. It talked about taxing the rich. I think about $175,000 is up to tax. And what they talked about a little bit was more of the it was going to that would increase the amount of money that those rich people got at the end of when they retired. So it's kind of a zero-sum game there. Do you have any thoughts on Social Security and how to fund it?
Yeah. So, an 80% solution is literally lifting the cap on taxation on the Social Security tax. Right now, it's capped out at $175,000. So what does that mean? Elon Musk, let's just say he makes $10 million. He only pays Social Security tax on $175,000. He doesn't pay any more of it. If you lifted that, 80% of our problems when it comes to the Social Security are solved. Literally. That's the right there, just off the bat, probably what we need to do. And this is the thing though. I come back to this point. Democrats have had power before. They haven't, like, it isn't like this is like a revelatory thing. The Social Security Trust Fund is going to become insolvent in the next decade and a half to 2 decades. Like, that's like a given. Like, we've known this for a long time. We need to actually be exercising leadership and vision to fix these things. So many of our problems in this country are because the richest, most powerful people in this country are pulling levers, and they're getting all the benefits, and everyone else is stuck footing the bill and is getting screwed. And part of that discussion about Social Security, sir, is part of that. There's no logical reason why it should be capped out at $175,000.
Christian, first, thank you so much for running. You're extremely inspiring, and thank you for making the sacrifice to do this for all of us. My question for you, I think your platform is tremendous, and I think it should be the platform of the Democratic Party, our state Democratic Party and our national Democratic Party. And I agree completely that the Democratic Party has let us down miserably. It's taken me way too long to recognize that. Yeah. What can we do as citizens and party members to change the position of the Democratic Party?
Well, the first one is elect me, but the second one, look, it's about also, there's got to be a coherence between the people we send to Washington and the people that we put in party leadership positions. I'm not going to come here and slam party leadership here in New Hampshire. It's maybe a little bit too easy. What I will say though is we need new energy and new blood that are willing to kind of stir things up. Like, it feels a little like, look, I'm a bit of an outsider, frankly. Like, you know, obviously I was in the Biden administration or national security role, but I'm willing to guess no one here had heard the Urrutia name until, you know, they found out that I was running. I am untethered from the broken politics of our state party that has not performed well enough. You know, in the military or at any company, if you don't perform as a leader, you're swapped out, you're changed. New people come with new visions. We need a lot more of that, and it has to happen too, not only at the national level, but at the state level too. So thank you for your question.
I've noticed over my many years of activity that separation of church and state has fallen, is broken, and a lot of what is going on is because religion has got wrapped up into our supposedly secular government. What might you do to recommend we fix that?
First, I don't think tax dollars should be used to subsidize religious institutions or religious education. This is a bit of a state or private. Well, that I agree with that too. But to answer your question, like, I think about what's happening, for example, with the voucher system here in the state of New Hampshire, where your tax dollars can be used to pay for vouchers to send people to religious schools. I don't think that makes any sense at all. But part of it too, frankly, is to have leadership that is not going to allow this to happen in DC. So right now, for example, your tax dollars are paying for the Department of Homeland Security and other parts of the federal government literally are putting out Bible verses when they talk about their policy. Not people are, but literally the institutions themselves. So I think we need to get away from this kind of Christian nationalism that's developed in the Republican Party, and we actually need to enforce the rules around that. But I do think it seems to have gotten a lot worse in the past few years, at least from my perspective.
Glad you're here. Thank you. Could you give us a little tutorial on how you would speak to people under the age of 40 or 35 this evening? Is there a way that you can synthesize or help us understand how we could reach out to Amber?
Yeah, you caught me right at the edge. Yeah, I'm 41. But look, I'll say this. So many young people in this, and I've heard this time and time again, so many young people in this country don't feel like they've gotten a fair shake. It costs so much, and it's part of my story too. It costs so much to go to school. And you come out, and your jobs are literally being replaced by AI. Literally. Like we're seeing those trend lines develop. And they're gonna get worse. And so then on top of it, you can't get a good paying job. And then when you actually want to set out and buy a home, you know, the major asset people have in this country is not Amazon stock. It's homes. That's how you build wealth and security in this country for the long run. Well, they can't afford a home. So then on top of it, they can't afford a home. Their jobs don't pay well. They're saddled with debt. They have kids. It's extremely expensive, and they find themselves in a debt spiral for years and years and years and years. And this is the thing. As a party, as people, we one have to acknowledge they're not getting a fair shake. And then we actually have to say we're going to actually fight to fix these systemic problems that are making it so hard to build a life in this country. And part of that is, I'm not sure. I don't think it's, oh, okay. I like that. But I think we have to acknowledge that. And then we have a chance to draw policy that will actually solve those problems. We've been talking about how expensive college is since I went to college. We haven't really drawn meaningful reform. And look, I'm sober-minded about it. We're not going to be able to fix everything in a year or 2 years. But people need to see that we fight for them. Because right now, the reason why people say I don't actually really trust the Democratic Party is because they've seen us not really fighting for them for a really long time. We have to make some change there. And I am confident, especially when we look at what we've seen with young men in this country in their 20s that are trending Republican because they feel like they're not getting a fair shake. We have to be able to understand that and say, hey, no, one, you don't want to engage in that type of toxic masculinity that's pervaded the right. But part of it is also has to be that we acknowledge that things aren't there for a lot of people in this country, especially young people. And we're actually going to draw some solutions to that. I think that's just incredibly important.
No more questions?
One more.
I have one more for you. Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I allowed to ask 2 questions?
Sure.
They're pretty disparate. Okay. So first question is a little more specificity on Medicare for all. Katie's question, because there's a lot of insurance companies and they're really big and have a huge lobby, so they're not just going to say, okay, we're out.
Yeah, sure.
And I get you wanting to have like a private option as well. So like, how will you actually do that?
Yeah, let me. So look, it's obviously going to be a fight to do that. But this is the thing. When you actually ask Americans, do you think everyone deserves universal health care? The vast, like 70 to 80% of Democrats say that. 50 to 60% of independents, 40% of Republicans. There's a consensus around that. Really started talking about this in 20. America was on board with that, frankly. Things have changed, and I am confident that if we get the right people in Washington, we can actually bring that change. And frankly, on this question of the private health insurance and being able to supplement it, look. The vast majority of other countries that have a nationalized healthcare system have some element of private insurance supplementation. We can do it. That's certainly the French model. It's also the British model as well. So I think we can actually look at other countries and what they've done well and what they haven't done that well. And just to make sure one thing's clear, when I talk about creating that public option on day one, that's a stopgap. That's a stopgap to make sure that what doesn't happen is what we're seeing with the ACA subsidies right now, where if they get pulled away, people can't afford health care. So that's the way I would deal with that.
Question 2 is, so we all were there and saw January 6th, 2021, and how that had completely failed to get prosecuted, and it, frankly, it feels like basically a replay of the Civil War, where it was just not robust enough of prosecution and, like, frankly, punishment for people who, again, did grave harm to this country. So what are we going to do to make sure that those people actually, justice is served?
So first, we actually have to investigate. I want to zoom out a little bit because it's not only about Jan 6. We actually have to be willing to commit to investigating and holding accountable Trump officials that have engaged in systematic violations of the Constitution and of the law, and that have profiteered from our government. I'll be candid. The Jan 6 defendants, it's challenging because the pardon power was used, right? So the question then becomes, okay, what do we do with that? It's within our constitutional structure. But I'll tell you this much, everyone should know those freaking people's names so that they carry that with them the rest of their life, that they were an insurrectionist group that wanted to take away the power of the people to elect their president, because that's exactly what they want to do. But I think Jan 6 is really complicated because of the way the administration has proceeded. I just don't want to give you false hope and say, oh, you'll just figure it all out. I think it's really complicated. Yeah. But I do think we need to commit to investigating the Trump administration and impeach people when it's appropriate. We need to do that, and we need to show the American people exactly the crimes that they've committed. Because I think we only know the tip of the iceberg, frankly.
Okay. Yeah. So, particularly in the media environment in this country, the national races, the national candidates, our Congress people and Senate get all the press. So the news is there all the time, and yet the power to actually make people's lives miserable on a day-to-day basis actually belongs to the state legislatures. It's, state legislatures, town councils, all of those organizations at the state level, and yet, many times people don't even know who their legislatures are. Many people do not realize that they think, oh, the feds are going to do something about it, but it's actually their rights are being taken away by the states. The challenges that we're being faced with here in New Hampshire is a takeover by the Free Staters. We're being, there's out-of-state people and out-of-state money that is coming in to try to take over our town councils, to try to take over the state legislature. And, we're seeing, basically what will happen if we don't get a Democratic majority by 2030, will be gerrymandered so that it'll be impossible to elect federal officials who are Democrats or progressives. What do you think, and what can you do or could you do as part of a federal delegation to help empower and reinforce the message that we really need people engaged at the local and state levels?
So, one thing, what is our unified message in New Hampshire? Does anyone know it? Yeah. No, but within the Democratic Party. Yeah, we don't have one. Yeah. There's a reason why it's really silent. Yeah. We don't have one. Our federally elected officials, they're doing one thing. Yeah. Folks at the state level are doing something else. Folks at the local level are doing something else. The Democratic Party needs actual leadership that's unified in messaging and in what supporting each other. State officials supporting the federal officials supporting the state, not disparate voices with disparate agendas. And so if I were to be elected, I'd actually work to reform our state party to be in line with our federal delegation to actually fight comprehensively across both arenas for actual change and actual appropriate messaging that is consistent, because it's wildly inconsistent, frankly, right now. That, to me, I come back to this notion, leadership. What's missing so desperately is leadership That's what, I mean, and I get it. Like, what does that mean? That means different things to different people. But I think we all know that we're not seeing enough leadership. People are willing to do bold things, take chances, take big swings, maybe get it wrong, but at least know that what we need desperately is change in this country and new energy and new blood and a new vision for how we do things. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. He must be exhausted by now. His voice is going.
I'll stick around and answer.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. If you could stick around a little bit, maybe you could have some personal conversations with folks for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
That would be great.
And I have cards here with my website and all that good stuff.
Oh.
Here at the table. Visit the website, sign up to volunteer.
Yeah.
Really, well, I have people now.
Thank you so much.
You know, just to me, our values not only that's obviously like that's easy for people to say in the future. How about living our values today during the campaign? I've done that. My campaign, 17,000 contributors to my campaign. The average donation size is $30 to my campaign. And the reason why, much harder to run a campaign like this, frankly, but the reason why we've done it like this is because I will not be beholden to any special interest. I don't take corporate PAC money. I certainly don't take APAC money. I fight for the people. But that means I need all of you. And if you have the capacity to volunteer, I'd ask you to do that, and it would help us out immensely.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, stick around a little bit. Okay? So I have one request for everybody. You have these nice little name tags. When you pass your name, the string inside behind your name so that we can easily alphabetize them. Okay, make my life a lot easier. So our next meeting February 11th, I think it is. We're thinking of doing a thing with our historic Rebecca Noel and Marsha Blaine about what's the worst it's ever been in our country to give us a historical perspective. So I'm hoping we might have John Lappy here as well. We're working on it, so please stay tuned. And we have the legislative alerts going out. I hope you all are on that list. If you're not on that list, let me know, because the legislature is up in action and there's a lot we need to weigh in on. Okay? So thank you, everybody. Good night.